Welcome to the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom for more than 10 years. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I began raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott from the Believe in Dog podcast. For more than 10 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned in case it could help you too. As the Alternative Dog Moms, Kimberly and I are bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and the brilliant people we're meeting along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
So I'm really excited. We have a very special guest with us today. He was once America's favorite veterinarian, the holistic practitioner of the year. He's a best-selling author. He's a founder of the Veterinary Cannabis Society. He was also a guest on one of my favorite human health podcasts, The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey. And he's done a lot of work to bring the topics that we care about into the mainstream. So Dr. Gary Richter, thank you so much for being with us today.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
So we always love starting off with a good origin story. So did you always want to be a veterinarian, and specifically with holistic practices? Is that something that you had from a young age, or did you have like a moment of reckoning in your career?
So, as to the first part of the question, I mean, I think as a kid, I was always an animal person and always a bit of a science geek. So maybe I was sort of destined to go in this direction. But as far as the integrative medicine went, I mean, that came much later. I had had a brief kind of brush, if you will, with Chinese medicine when I was in veterinary school. Um, Saw a horse treated with acupuncture and herbs that, a horse that was not supposed to get better, and it got better. And it had always stuck with me. And then, years later, when I was, a handful of years into being a veterinarian, I kind of got to this point where I was really looking forward at, the rest of my career and trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I realized that sort of just standard general practice veterinary medicine was just not something that was going to be enough for me personally. And I started looking around at a lot of different options, and I came across an organization that trained veterinarians in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And ironically, or perhaps due to some sort of fate, the person teaching that course was the same person I had seen treat that horse in vet school.
Who was it?
His name is Shen Shei. He is the person that runs the Qi Institute.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant, brilliant veterinarian. So anyway, I took that course, and then started treating my patients with acupuncture, and started realizing that things were doing better than I had seen similar things do in the past. Now that I was incorporating acupuncture, and as I've often said, once you've seen something like that, you don't unsee it. So acupuncture led to chiropractic, led to herbal training, hyperbaric oxygen, regenerative medicine, etc. And it's become kind of a just sort of a just a career goal to really just find what else is out there that is sort of outside of the standard Western medicine box, that A, has legitimate scientific evidence behind it, and B, really works. And if I can find things that check both of those boxes, then it is absolutely something that I will look at incorporating.
That's wonderful. It's always interesting to us, Kimberly. We have met other practitioners who learn acupuncture, and then just kind of stay at that level and don't get into fresh feeding or raw diets or even
Right.
think that there's a connection with nutrition. And so I'm always curious, like, is it for some people, it's like the opening of the rabbit hole of like, oh, there's so much more. And then other people are like, oh, this works great for back pain and just kind of leave it there, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, philosophically for me, like anytime you sort of step over that line into what one might describe as alternative medicine, effectively, a lot of what you're doing is you're looking at modalities that help the body heal itself. And I think when you start to look at it through that lens, it just becomes a question of, well, okay, like, well, what else is there? It's to me, there was no choice in this in this decision. It just had to be.
From a pet parent perspective, I can relate.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where that's where I feel like I'm always doing with my dogs is looking for more information. Even though they're doing great right now, I'm
Sure.
constantly looking for more information. I feel like I'm staying ahead of anything that might come along. Plus, things are changing. New information's coming out. Despite the fact that I feel like it's interesting to see so many veterinarians on social media who are still so wildly against things that we're seeing benefits. We are seeing so many people talk about, yes, I took my dog to acupuncture, or my dog takes these herbs, even dogs, my dog has cancer and my holistic vet is doing these things. And 4 years later, my dog's still with me. And maybe that's not every dog on the planet, but not every dog on the planet is being exposed to all of these things. So it's just like, I'm surprised that more people aren't curious.
No, I agree, and I think there's this. I think the problem that you see happen is that kind of the Western medical community tends to want to lump anything that's not conventional Western medicine all into the same box. I mean, number one, like, who among us is really prepared to completely discount 5,000 years worth of Chinese medicine? Like, really? Like, we're just gonna say that something that they've been doing for 5,000 years is complete garbage? Like, there's no logic to that. And you know what? The other thing is that, quite frankly, like, there are things that people do on the alternative medicine side that make no sense. There's no scientific basis behind them. They are sometimes outright dangerous. This is the problem with the internet sometimes is, well, the internet said I can do this, so I'm going to do it. And that's where I think it's really important for people to be, ideally speaking, be educated, or if not, find somebody that is, so that what you're doing is both safe and hopefully effective.
so when it comes to diet, I really appreciate how common sense that you are in the information that you share by recognizing that to some extent, we're always going to have people that are feeding kibble, uh,
Yeah.
and you give options for how they can improve that bowl, as well as at the same time promoting that raw and fresh feeding, is a great healthy choice. And I really just appreciate that balanced approach because. Not everybody, no matter how much we want them to, are gonna be able to jump on the whole fresh feeding train 100%,
Uh-huh.
whether it's resource
Sure.
related, so so I really appreciate how well-rounded you are in your approach.
Well, you know what? I mean, we all have to live in the real world, right? And the reality is you're right. For a variety of reasons, even people that want to feed fresh whole foods to their pets, there may be a reason why that's just not necessarily always possible. And sort of the way I explain it to people is, I do my best to eat healthy. That does not mean that every single meal I eat is a perfectly balanced, fresh, whole food diet. It just, I mean, we're living in the real world here. Like, I was at a conference in San Diego for the past few days, and I flew home yesterday, and I wound up eating at the airport, and you can imagine what I ate at the airport was not exactly the world's healthiest thing. So, I mean, the bottom line is like not every meal is going to be perfect, and you know, to say, well, since I can't eat 100% fresh whole foods, I should just throw it all out the window and eat junk food all the time. Like nobody would say that that statement makes sense. So the bottom line is the more fresh whole foods we eat or our pets eat, the better. The less processed food, the better. And I think everybody has to live in the real world. You do what you can. So feed as much fresh whole food to your pets as you can do, whether it's logistically or financially. There's a lot of ways to do it, as you know. You can buy foods that are either like frozen cooked, frozen raw, freeze dried food. You can make food at home. There's any number of options. I often tell people that any recommendation that I make for your pet, whether it's food, it's supplements, it's medication, whatever it is, that recommendation has to be sustainable or I'm not doing anybody any favors. If I send you home with 35 supplements and say you have to give these 3 times a day, we all know that's not going to happen. And as such, I'm taking your money, but I'm not doing your pet any favors. So like whatever it is, it has to be a sustainable solution, and I think that is one of the many ways that medicine winds up having to be personalized.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where I think you also have more success in people wanting to do more. Because if they start by adding fresh food or, soaking the kibble in bone broth, buying healthier treats, and they see their dog's excitement and they
Yeah.
see, their dog's excited about mealtime. And I actually experienced this with my mom. She, in her retirement years, she decided to get a dog and then 2 dogs. And of course, she calls me and asks me what's to feed, but I'm not going to feed raw. So don't tell me that. And I honestly didn't know what to say after that. And so I just said, buy the best quality kibble you can find. But she started with a kibble, calls me back, dog's not interested in kibble. And in my head, I'm thinking, of course not, it's dead food. But that's not what I'm going to say to my mom. And I just started, I was like, well, have you decided to add, or thought about adding this? And she was like, oh, I didn't know I can do that. And I didn't know I can do this. And she ended up buying books online and cookbooks and just really getting into it. And she would read off recipes to me. One thing, and this is going somewhere, that I find interesting in not only the cookbooks that are sold online, but there are these dog food recipe groups on Facebook. I don't understand what people have against calcium. It's so many foods, like, they'll dump tons of grains, like rice and oats and quinoa all in the same recipe, but no calcium in sight. And, explaining this to my mom that she has dogs that are still puppies, and it's like, "I want you to do this, I want you to feed them a great diet, but what you're feeding is what you would eat." It's sort of like you went to the store and just bought a bunch of ingredients that for a human we know are good for us, and then we cook it for our dogs, but we don't think about anything beyond like what a dog needs. And I was curious about your thoughts on the fact that, when it comes to these homemade dog food recipes, many of them are highly deficient.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think I agree with you. Like a lot of the stuff that if you go online and just like Google homemade dog food recipes, like you're going to come up with a lot of things that are really, really problematic. And I'm very adamant with people that if they are going to feed a fresh, like a homemade diet, then they need to be working off of a recipe that was balanced by a veterinary nutritionist.
Mhm.
This is absolutely not something that you can eyeball. You can't just put meat and vegetables in a bowl and call it good. And the kind of the big difference between, say, people and animals in this sense, it's not a physiologic difference at all. The difference is that we as people tend to eat a lot of variety in our food. So while every meal we eat may not be perfectly balanced. The hope is that in the aggregate over time, you're checking all the boxes that you need to. Most dogs eat the same thing every day. So if that diet is deficient, those deficiencies are going to amplify over time, and you're going to wind up with problems. And I mean, problems don't necessarily mean a clinical disease process caused by a deficiency. So, for example, it's really, really hard, for example, to cause rickets from a vitamin D deficiency. Boy, you really would have to work at that. But if you think that your dog who's eating a vitamin D deficient diet doesn't have a substandard functioning immune system, isn't at greater risk for cancer because their vitamin D is low, you got another thing coming. Like, your body is designed to function optimally on a certain spectrum of nutrients. And when it doesn't get that spectrum of nutrients, will it find a way to get by? Sure it will. I mean, you see people out there who eat McDonald's most meals and, they don't generally drop over dead immediately. Frequently they do eventually. But biology has an amazing way of figuring out how to make it work for as long as it possibly can. But I mean, if the goal here is we want to give our pets the longest, healthiest life we can give them, it has to start with nutrition.
So you've actually written a book about longevity in dogs. So what I really liked about your book is that you talk about nutrition, but you also talk about so many other things like, enrichment and exercise and, keeping it a healthy weight. And what are some of the other keys that you want to make sure that pet parents know?
Sure. I mean, the way I kind of sat down to write that book, there's actually two of them, Longevity for Dogs and Longevity for Cats. But I started writing that from the perspective of I wanted to make longevity science as accessible as possible for people. I mean, it's complicated. The science end of it is complicated. But, the bottom line is the three most important things, and this is true for people as well as animals, that you can do for longevity, you don't need a veterinarian for. You don't need a physician for. Those three things are diet, exercise, and lifestyle. Like, you have to get those sorted out before you're gonna get into supplements and regenerative medicine and peptides and all the fancy stuff. Diet, exercise, lifestyle, properly balanced, fresh, whole food diet, an appropriate amount of exercise. It is certainly possible to over-exercise a dog as well as it is to under-exercise them. And lifestyle really has a lot to do with stress level, and ultimately cortisol levels. And there's lots of reasons why an animal may be having stress. It could be due to other animals in the house. I think one of the things that people really need to understand is that the stress level of the people living in the house has a very, very significant impact on the stress level of the pets living in the house. So, if your dog lives in a house with people that have, shall we say, a tumultuous relationship, there's a lot of yelling, a lot of arguing, don't even try and tell yourself that the dog or the cat is okay with that. It's not. And it is absolutely raising their cortisol levels and causing all kinds of problems. So diet, exercise, lifestyle, is really, I mean, that is the cornerstone of everything. And like I say, I mean, from there, then it really launches into getting, for me, from a medical perspective, is where it gets interesting. Things like supplements, pharmaceuticals, regenerative medicine, biometric monitoring, all the cool stuff that's being done on the human side for longevity now as well. But like I say, you gotta start with that foundational stuff. You can't start giving a dog that's eating kibble and gets no exercise and give it stem cells and think you're doing a great job. It's just not gonna do it.
That's such an important point. I keep hearing about this rapamycin drug,
Mhm.
and I know they're doing trials of it in dogs, and then there's the Loyal, I think, company
Yep.
that's launching it. So what do you like? Me personally, I'm so like averse to giving any kind of pharmaceutical that I isn't absolutely necessary. So I'm like, I don't think I would do this. But what do you know about that?
So I'll preface what I'm going to say by saying this, and this is a true statement for people as well as animals. If you think that you are going to have your pet live 20, 30, 40, 50% beyond their average expected lifespan, or you yourself as a person, and you think you're doing that without pharma and high-end medical science, you're lying to yourself. Uh, it's just not going to happen. It would have already happened if such things were possible. This is ultimately where the rubber hits the road from, a term you're very familiar with, biohacking. If you're a Dave Asprey person, then you know all about biohacking. What this is manipulating cellular and subcellular processes in the body to essentially change the way that the body ages. So the preliminary data on rapamycin is very encouraging. I don't think anybody would make the statement that it's a done deal and all dogs should be on rapamycin. I don't think we're at that point. Loyal, while they are being understandably a little bit tight-lipped about exactly what their formula is and what it does because they're going through FDA trials and there's a bunch of IP involved here. But they're working on getting a pharmaceutical approved specifically for the purpose of promoting canine longevity. I personally am very excited about it. I've spoken with the company. I think what they're doing is very exciting, and I hope the trials work out the way that everybody hopes that they do. Because if they do, it could be a game changer. So again, like I say, I mean, once you get this diet, exercise, lifestyle thing sorted out, that's when some of this other stuff is really going to come into play. And I mean, of course, the hope is somewhere along the line we'll get good enough on the pharma that it literally becomes, just take this pill or take this injection and it's going to dramatically extend your lifespan and your health span. We're not there, but that's the direction that everything's moving in.
What about for people who don't have the diet, exercise, lifestyle figured out for their dog or even themselves? I guess that's what I keep picturing.
Yeah, I mean, the good news about that is, I think the pushback that you frequently get with people is it's too much money or I don't have the time. That's the standard pushback, whether it's a dog or it's a person. And you know what? The truth of the matter is we all have the time. It's just a question of are you are you willing to allocate your time differently? So so there's nobody out there who doesn't have 30 minutes a couple of times a day to walk their dog. I mean, that's just yeah, nobody's that busy. I mean, so exercise lifestyle, like you can change the environment in your house, you can pay more attention to your dog, do more environmental enrichment stuff. I mean, all that stuff is free. The diet is where it can get a little bit, yeah, I mean, that's where the finances come in. But again, as we were discussing earlier, even if you can't afford, even if you can't afford to feed your dog a completely fresh whole food diet, go out and buy some some fresh meat and vegetables and add some of that to their kibble. I mean, usually what I tell people is as long as 75% plus or minus of what your dog is eating is a properly balanced diet, feel free and play with the rest of it. Add fresh meat and vegetables. If they're still eating 75%, even if it's kibble, at least we know they're getting all the vitamins and minerals and whatnot they need. And you're still getting some benefit of feeding some fresh food. There's ways to do this. It just takes some will.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like I'm fortunate because I live in an area of the country in the Pacific Northwest where I am surrounded by farms.
Sure.
And so I get, when I have a lot of friends who are homesteaders. And so I take their organs off their plate, what they're not going to feed. And they spread my name around. So
That's great.
whenever, anyway, what I love is that people will, their freezer, they'll wake up in the morning, their freezer was unplugged overnight. And even though everything in there is still frozen, they're so nervous about pathogens that they'll get rid
Sure.
of it. So I can get a whole freezer full of grass-fed meat, um,
Yeah.
for free. And it's just like I try to encourage people, get involved in they have these local groups and stuff like that and put your name out there. And it's astounding. You can basically go from spending a lot of money on commercial raw to spending hardly any money when you are trying to put it together yourself and then just educate yourself on really what a dog needs in their diet. And
That's a
it's
very true statement, and I mean, and another important thing for people to understand is like when you're buying meat for that purpose for your dog, you don't need to buy the expensive stuff.
Mhm.
Like you don't need to buy, filet or porterhouse or whatnot. Like your dog doesn't care. The nutritional value of the scraps are the same. So like, I mean, go to a butcher and, see if they'll sell you the leftover tidbits that, just didn't quite fit the shape that goes in the meat case. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Organ meats tend to be really inexpensive because, a lot of people don't buy them. So there's a lot of ways that one can do this. Like I say, it just requires the interest and the will to do it. And my job and your job is to sort of educate people to that effect. And I mean, it's much the same, with people and their own health. Like every smoker knows that that's bad for them. Like it's not a mystery to anybody that that's going to cause cancer, but yet people still do it. Everybody that doesn't eat a healthy diet, they know that that's not really good for them, but they do it anyway. It's just a question of like, when are you going to metaphorically put your foot down and say, I'm going to make a change?
Absolutely. So I know that you are one of the founders of the Veterinary Cannabis Society, and I'm really excited to see more conversation around that. I feel like people are sort of comfortable with CBD for the most part,
Sure.
but they don't know that it can be used in other ways also.
Yeah. Cannabis is a really, really fascinating herbal medicine, in part because I mean, cannabis is such a kaleidoscope of ingredients. There are so many different active compounds that are produced by this plant, that depending on the sort of mix of compounds in any given preparation, it's going to have different medical effects. So, things that we know that cannabis does medically speaking, it can treat pain, inflammation. It has anti-cancer properties. It's gastrointestinal supportive. It can have anti-seizure properties. It can help with anxiety. The list kind of goes on and on. Myself and a number of colleagues founded the Veterinary Cannabis Society largely out of a need a number of years back when cannabis started becoming somewhat popular out there in the animal health space. Uh, a lot of states, California included, found themselves in a position where their state regulatory agency, so the California Veterinary Medical Board in our case, literally told veterinarians in California, if we talk to anybody about using cannabis as medicine, that they were gonna come for our licenses. And that was a real problem for me because that really sort of goes back to what we were originally talking about, which is I will I will look at anything that has scientific data and efficacy behind it, and cannabis certainly fit that bill. Um, and I kind of got to this place with the veterinary medical board, and I literally said this to them in a meeting, which is, if you are going to ask me to make a judgment call between whether my responsibility to you, the board, or whether my responsibility to my clients and my patients is greater, you're going to lose. I mean, maybe it wasn't really the smartest thing for me to do in the moment, because I basically sort of metaphorically gave them the middle finger and said, "Come get me."
Yeah.
Um, in hindsight, probably not the smartest thing I've ever done. Um, but um, it took a number of years, but we actually got legislation passed in California that now allows veterinarians to be able to recommend cannabis products. So we got that all sorted out. It took a long time, and a lot of work, but it also became the genesis of this nonprofit, the Veterinary Cannabis Society. And really, our purpose is to help both on the regulatory end in other states and now other countries, because it's become an international organization, but also on the educational side of things. So, helping both pet owners and pet parents understand what cannabis can do, educating veterinarians about how they can use cannabis in their practice. It Cannabis is not the end all be all of medicine, but it is an incredibly useful tool when used in the right circumstances. It's unfortunately saddled with this stigma, that comes from, decades and decades of misinformation, which we don't really have to get into. But nonetheless, I think it's finally coming out of that. I think, it's really, it's becoming very mainstream. I don't think it's probably going to be too long before we actually wind up with cannabis pharmaceuticals. I feel like it's too out there at this point for that to not happen. But I mean, it's going to take the federal government to make some changes, and not to get too political, but right now the federal government is doing a whole bunch of nothing. Hopefully once things get back on track somewhat in Washington, maybe we can get some of that stuff done.
So what was the concern? Like, why is it that you're being told, originally we're being told you're not allowed to use it in a veterinary manner? Is it just that it's a Schedule One drug, legally, or what was the concern or pushback?
Well, I mean, so it's interesting because, in California, as you're probably aware, I mean, we've had medicinal cannabis use for people since 1996. So that's nothing new in this state. And recreational use came a little bit later. So, the argument that, well, it's a Schedule One drug and you can't use it, really didn't hold a whole lot of water, because physicians had been using it in this state for years. So the justification really came from two places. One of them was the statement of, well, the statutes for medical cannabis in California were written in such a way that it very specifically said physicians can recommend cannabis. It did not say veterinarians. Frankly, that was an oversight, but nonetheless, that's how it was written. So that's the piece of leverage they were using. I think the reality is probably much better illuminated by one of the first veterinary board meetings that myself and some of my colleagues went to have this conversation with them. Um, we were having this conversation with the board about why it was important that this happened. And the president of the board at that time stood up and said, "I don't know much about cannabis, but I know it kills dogs." And And that was where we started, with that degree of misinformation of, like, and what a contradictory statement. I don't know anything about this thing, but I'm going to make this really inflammatory statement anyway, even though I'm completely uninformed.
Oh, sounds like social media.
Yes, yes. Except the person in question was probably too old to be on social media. But nonetheless, I mean, that's really what it was about. It was a sort of hearkening back to the old dare campaigns of the 80s of like drugs are bad. There is no exception. That's just how it is. And that's what we were up against.
Yeah, I come from an old school law enforcement family, and
Oh, so
so I know.
Yeah,
So, one of the other modalities that I've seen you talk about online that is really fascinating to me because it seems like it is something that pet parents can learn a little bit is acupressure.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how we might incorporate that at home?
Sure. So, I mean, most people are familiar with acupuncture. So, there are known acupuncture points on the body that when you stimulate that point, it will lead to some physiologic effect. So, classically, that's done with a needle to stimulate that point, but acupressure is really stimulating that point with direct pressure, such as with a finger. So like a gentle massage over that area can have an effect on that acupuncture point as well. So people can be trained in acupressure points for whatever may be going on with their pet to help them with whatever's going on. As a general rule, acupressure is not going to be as dramatically effective as acupuncture is. But the good news about acupressure is like that's something you can do at home every day. So maybe it balances out if you stick with it and you do it on a regular basis. But I love therapeutics that people can do at home. Partially because just from a medical perspective, I mean, even if somebody's gonna come into my office weekly, that means there's 6 days out of the week that pet's not getting treated. And part of it's really about that whole human animal bond is that people people being involved and feeling like they're part of the solution in that way is really good for both the pet and the animal. It's good for everybody. So we'll frequently try and find things that people can do at home, whether it's acupressure or like when we have animals come into the office for physical therapy, we very commonly we'll give people like an exercise regimen to do at home. Um, there's things like PEMF beds, red light therapy. There's all kinds of stuff people can do at home. And that way, in the in between times when they're not coming into the office, they're still getting treated.
Yeah, I love that. So, is there any do you have something that you're really excited about that's you wish everybody knew about or that's coming down the pike that you're following and, what gets you excited?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I mean, there's a couple of things. Um, I think the world of regenerative medicine is absolutely fascinating. We do stem cell therapy in my office, and we've had a lot of good response to that. But like when you look at some of what's coming from a stem cell therapy perspective, it almost looks like science fiction. Some of these things that are going on. The other thing that I find really fascinating, and it's actually something I am directly involved with, um, is really changing the paradigm of putting people in the driver's seat of being in charge of their pet's health. And what I mean by that is, so I am the founder of a company called Pet Metrics, and what we're creating is a platform that starts with a wearable. So if you think of Fitbit, Apple Watch, or a Ring, what have you, something to that effect, but something that the dog would wear. So this platform is going to be pulling biometric data from your pet, heart rate, respiration rate, movement, activity, what have you. We're also going to be collecting information both from the pet owner, so my dog's been vomiting or they're limping or something to that effect, as well as being able to, through the use of AI, to read and interpret both their electronic medical records and their lab results. And based on that, put together a a personalized profile of what that pet looks like, so the platform can start to give you information on how to best take care of your pet as an individual. So, we talked a lot about fresh whole food diets. Well, let's just say for the sake of conversation that your dog has heart disease or liver disease or kidney disease. Fresh whole food diets are still great, but their nutritional requirements have changed. So now we need to start coaching people on, okay, we need to move in this direction food wise. So whether it's food, exercise, whether it's supplements, whether something's going on with the pet saying, hey, there's something going on here. It's time for you to go see your veterinarian and get them involved. So for, perfect example would be, let's say somebody has an older Labrador and they get an alert on the Pet Metrics app that says, "Hey, your dog's activity level is down a little bit, but their heart rate and respiration rate is up." That might not be something that anybody would actually notice at home, but is probably an indication that there's a problem. So whether or not that problem is they're sore or they have some sort of major pathology going on, there's just no outward clinical signs yet is unknown, but that's when you get to the veterinarian and find out before it's a hair on fire trip to the emergency clinic. We're looking at a telemedicine platform so we can get people on a video call with a subject matter expert so they can talk about, medicine, supplements, integrative care, training, behavior, what have you. So nonetheless, the whole platform is really designed to put you in charge of your pet's health. And me as the veterinarian or every other veterinarian out there, we're still out there to do veterinary stuff. But there's so much more information that you can get that you don't have to get directly from your veterinarian. And the reality is not every veterinarian is an expert in every subject, and that is certainly true for me as well. So there are things that, for example, if I saw, I might refer you to a different veterinarian who is an expert in that particular field. So now we might be able to just get you connected via telehealth to talk to somebody like that, or maybe just give you a local referral and say, hey, you should probably go see this person. So, I mean, I think both from a human medicine and an animal health perspective, I think that's the future of medicine is personalized medicine. That's how we're going to sort of break through that next barrier longevity wise. So that's something that I really find fascinating and exciting, and it's been a really fun journey getting to build this platform out.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, like, that's a site that I would spend an afternoon just playing around on and just seeing
Right.
what my dogs need now because just there are so many ways you can go because it takes away being able to, one thing I always say is focus on the dog in front of you and to be
Yep.
able to customize everything from diet to an exercise plan to, to get those alerts that remind you, hey, get outside and touch the grass and seeing not only getting those alerts and understanding that, but also seeing over time the benefits that you're with your dog. Because I think a lot of people, everyone wants the evidence in front of them, and this is a program that would put the evidence right there. They can see charts or whatever
Yep.
over time to see the
Yeah,
benefits.
you can see the objective data, and the great part about it is like you see the data, you get the recommendations, you implement them, and then you can see the change in the data. You can see them get better.
Yeah.
So it's a really great reward system
Hmm.
of like, wow, look, I made my dog healthier. Let's keep
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it opens up the world. I mean, there's so many people who say, they don't have a veterinarian in their area, or they don't have one that they like or that gives them what they
Exactly.
need. And you're opening up to all of these. I mean, what you said about specialists. I had a dog several years ago that had lymphoma, and I worked with an oncologist, but she was a traditionally taught canine oncologist. And I told her, I'm going to continue doing these things for my dogs, but I'm going to let you know what I'm doing just in case any of it, conflicts with the medication. And when she saw over the year that my dog, when all the other dogs that she was treating were getting worse and my dog was doing great, she was more open to it, and she started making recommendations for her colleague, like, "Hey, this is a
Yeah.
time I think you need to start looking into acupuncture." And I mean, it went from, "I'm gonna need you to stop feeding your dog raw," to,
Yeah.
9 months later, "Okay, so now let's talk about acupuncture and let's talk about this." And it's just like being able to
That's
have
great.
that for everyone
Yeah.
is just
That's terrific. And just so you're aware, there's like literally 4 integrative veterinary oncologists in the country.
yeah.
So, the fact that you didn't have one locally is no great surprise. There's literally 4 of them.
So with things like telemedicine and virtual medicine in the veterinary field, is that something else that's gonna have regulatory barriers?
Yeah, yeah, so yes, and quite frankly, it should, have regulatory barriers. And I think there's a lot of, the sort of the magic here is in the details of what actually happens during these calls. So, for example, you know, if I were to get on a call with you and we were to talk about what's going on with your pet, and I would, make some recommendations as far as like diet, supplements, that sort of thing, that's all fine. Like, let's just say for the sake of argument that it sounded like your dog needed antibiotics. Well, if you're not in the state of California, it would not be legal for me to prescribe antibiotics to you. But what I could do is I could say, hey, based on what you're describing, I think your dog might need antibiotics. So it's probably time to have a visit with your local veterinarian to, just to get that taken care of. So, there's always going to be limitations of such things. But I think just being able to have the conversation is going to be so valuable to people, especially given what it takes to get a veterinary appointment these days. And the fact that, I think any doctor's office you walk into, whether it's veterinary or human, it can sometimes feel a little bit rushed. So doing it through a telehealth platform, I think, is a great way for people to, be able to get some questions answered and get some fears allayed. And I think what a lot of people really, really want to know is just tell me what I need to do. That takes a lot of the fear out of the situation. Like, give me a plan of action and I'll do it. I'm just so lost right now. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I 100% agree. And having that being not only just tailored to the dog, but tailored to the human, their lifestyle, what they're willing to do, and having someone to be able to guide them through that, it makes such a huge difference. Because when you go to the vet, I mean, we were talking to Dr. Nick Thompson last week, and he's like, Kimberly, you're a different person. Because I go to the vet, I have no problem saying no to certain vaccines. I have no problem, like, they know that I feed my dogs a raw food diet. I can advocate for all of that, and I can ask questions.
Sure.
I
Sure.
can articulate why I'm not doing what I'm doing, but that's not everyone. A lot of people get into the vet's office and maybe they plan to articulate and to advocate, but when you're hit with someone who's telling you, no, you have to do these things, and if you don't do these things, your dog's, it's hard in the
No,
moment.
I agree. I agree. And, the medical profession writ large tends to be not very open-minded. It's just, it's how we're trained.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it's tough for people, especially if you don't have the science and medical background to like have that conversation with somebody.
exactly. I think the platform you were talking about it would just flip the script
Yeah.
because it feels like more of a personal conversation where I would feel like, this is not what I'm comfortable with. This is what I've come across. This is what I've read, and be able to have that back and forth. Like what you said, it's not going to be rushed.
Yeah.
And you can it's a little easier over a screen to be able to slow things down because you're not there with a line of syringes on the counter.
No, it's very true. And yeah, I mean, and that was really a lot of the genesis behind this is that, the best medicine is personalized medicine, and there's so much to talk about now. You know what? There are people that literally want to go to the veterinarian, get the vaccines, walk out the door, and not think about it again for a whole nother year. And that's fine. That's what they're going to do. But for the rest of us, that want a much more comprehensive discussion, sometimes that can be a little hard to come by. And this is going to be a way that people can do it.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're really excited to,
Yes.
yeah, keep following
Follow
this.
along.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, we will have links so everybody can find you on social media and find your books. Is there anything else you want us to follow?
If you're interested, from the perspective of the fresh whole foods for dogs and cats that I've formulated and supplements, ultimatepetnutrition.com. So there's that, and the website for pet metrics, it's petmetrics.com. Fair warning, that website is going to be updated fairly soon, but it'll still give you a pretty good idea of what we're doing and the road that we're going down. So just kind of keep an eye on that as well.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time today.
You bet. Thank you.